She stood there, a woman who had built $100 million company from nothing. A woman who had fired executives without blinking, who had walked into boardrooms full of powerful men and made every single one of them nervous just by sitting down and opening her folder. She stood there, and she couldn't speak. Her eyes were wet. Her hands, the same hands that had signed contracts worth more than most people earn in an entire lifetime, were trembling slightly at her sides. Not from cold, not from fear, from something she hadn't felt in a very long time, and all because of him, a quiet man, a simple man, her own employee. A man she had honestly, genuinely, barely noticed in 3 full years of walking past him in hallways until today, until this moment. Until he led her up 2 flights of stairs in her own building and showed her something that no boardroom, no balance sheet, no billion-dollar deal had ever shown her. The truth about herself. He looked at her, completely calm, completely unhurried, and said 7 words she will never forget for the rest of her life. Stay quiet. Follow me. I want to show you something. No one had spoken to her like that. Not in 20 years of business. Not once. She almost said no. She almost reminded him exactly who she was and exactly whose building he was standing in. But something stopped her. Something in his eyes. Something steady and ancient and certain. The look of a man who has already survived the worst thing imaginable and come out the other side still standing, still soft, still whole. She followed him. And what happened in the next few minutes? What he showed her, what his child said, and what she saw with her own eyes, didn't just stun her. It broke something open inside her that had been sealed shut for 30 years. So stay with me today, because this is the kind of story that reaches into your chest and reminds you what is real. And by the time we reach the end, I promise you, you will think of someone you love, and you will want to call them. His name was Daniel Mercer, 44 years old, maintenance supervisor at Callaway Enterprises, one of the fastest growing logistics companies on the East Coast. He had worked there for 3 years, quietly, reliably, almost invisibly. He was the man who fixed things before anyone else even realized they were broken. The flickering light on the 3rd floor, repaired before the first morning coffee was poured. The heating unit in the server room that started making a strange sound on a Tuesday night. Daniel had already sourced the part and replaced it by Wednesday at 6 a.m. before a single employee arrived. He never asked to be noticed. He never complained. He simply showed up every single day, and he did his work with a kind of quiet dignity that most people in that building were far too busy to see. But what none of his co-workers knew, what he never once mentioned at work, was what Daniel's mornings looked like before he ever pulled into that parking lot. Every day began at 6:15. He would stand at the kitchen stove and make 2 fried eggs and toast. Noah's breakfast, the only breakfast Noah would eat without argument. He packed the lunch himself, turkey sandwich on whole wheat, apple slices in a small bag, and tucked between the sandwich and the apple, every single morning without exception, a small folded note. Not long, not sentimental in the way people expect, just something simple. Something that said, "I thought about you this morning while you were still sleeping. I am glad you are here." Then he would drive Noah to school, walk him to the entrance even though Noah was 12 and perfectly capable of walking himself, and stand there watching until his son's backpack disappeared through the double doors. Only then would Daniel get back in his car, take one long breath, and drive to work. 3 years ago, Daniel's wife, Sarah, passed away after an 18-month battle with ovarian cancer. She was 41 years old. Noah had been 9, old enough to understand that his mother was not coming back, young enough that the loss reached into him and rewrote something fundamental, left a stillness behind his eyes, a gravity, a seriousness that no child his age should ever have to carry. The last morning, Sarah was truly herself. Before the hospital, before the final week. She had sat with Noah at that same kitchen table and watched him draw. He had been drawing her. A simple sketch, the way children draw, more feeling than form. She had picked it up and held it for a long time without speaking. Then she looked at Daniel over Noah's head, and her eyes said everything that the months of treatment and fear and hoping had made too hard to say out loud. Take care of him. That's all. Just take care of him. Daniel had nodded. He had reached across the table and covered her hand with his. He had kept that promise every single day since. After Sarah died, Daniel did what he always does when something impossible arrives at his door. He didn't collapse. Not in front of Noah. Not once. He packed his grief into somewhere deep and quiet inside himself. Not to hide from it, but to carry it without letting it crush his son. And he became both parents at the same time. He learned which nights Noah needed to talk and which nights he simply needed someone sitting nearby. He learned that sometimes, at 10 o'clock at night, his son would come and settle beside him on the couch without a word, and that the right response, the only right response, was to put down whatever he was doing and simply stay there. No fixing, no advice, no words at all. Just presence, just warmth. Just, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Some nights after Noah was asleep, Daniel would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, and he would talk to Sarah. Not out loud, just in his mind, in the quiet way of a man who loves someone so much that even death cannot fully end the conversation. He made the honor roll, Sarah. You would have cried. I almost did. He's getting so tall. I look at him sometimes and I can see you in his face so clearly it stops my breath. He still sleeps with the lamp on. Don't tell him I told you. Daniel Mercer was not a wealthy man by any measure this world typically uses, but anyone who truly saw him, fully, completely saw him, would tell you without hesitation that he was one of the richest human beings they had ever met. Now, Ms. Calloway, Margaret Calloway, 57 years old, self-made in the truest sense of that word, born in a working-class family in central Pennsylvania, the first in her family to finish college, the first to own a business, the first to build something that would outlast her. She had spent 30 years becoming exactly who she was. Sharp, decisive, formidable. The kind of woman who made things happen through sheer force of clarity and will. She was not cruel. She was not cold in the way people sometimes assumed. She simply had no patience for anything that did not move forward. She had never married. For decades she had told herself, and anyone who asked, that she simply hadn't had the time. But there were moments. Quiet moments. The kind that ambush you at the end of a long day when the last assistant has gone home and the city darkens. Outside your window and your reflection appears in the glass looking back at you. Older than you expected, more tired than you intended. And the comfortable story you have been telling yourself suddenly doesn't quite hold together the way it used to. She had chosen this life. Every day, every year she had chosen it. And she had paid for that choice in a currency that never appears on any financial statement. She ate dinner alone most evenings. She read industry reports while she ate. She answered emails at 10 p.m. and sometimes midnight. She had a beautiful apartment on the 42nd floor that she had professionally decorated and almost never truly inhabited. She slept there, changed clothes there, and left. She was not lonely. That was not the word she would have chosen. She was simply somewhere above everything, like the woman in a window, looking down at a world full of noise and motion and connection and having completely forgotten. So slowly, she never noticed it happening, that she was allowed to go back down. She had absolutely no idea who Daniel Mercer really was. And on that grey October morning when she walked past him in the parking lot, and their eyes held for just a beat longer than usual, neither of them had any reason to believe this Tuesday would be anything other than ordinary. It started with the freight elevator, down again, third time that month. She had a vendor walkthrough in 40 minutes. She went down herself, That was one thing even her harshest critics acknowledged about Margaret Calloway. She never hid behind titles when something needed handling. She found Daniel in the basement, already on his knees beside the open panel. Tools arranged around him with the calm precision of a man who has done this 10,000 times. "How long?" she asked. He didn't look up immediately. He finished the connection he was working on, careful, unhurried, then sat back on his heels and looked at her directly. 20 minutes, maybe less. "I need it in 15. Then I need quiet," he said simply. "And I need you to step back." Margaret blinked, not rudely said, not aggressively, just directly, as if her title and her 14 floors of authority carried very little weight down here in a basement next to a broken machine. As if the only authority that mattered right now was competence, and his was not in question. She stepped back. She didn't say a word. 13 minutes later, the doors opened clean and smooth. She was already moving toward them when he spoke. "Ms. Calloway." She turned. He was standing at the edge of the corridor, still holding his wrench, and his expression had changed. Something deliberate in it now. Something that had been quietly decided. "My son is here today," he said. "Half day at school. Sitter canceled. He's up in the break room. He's quiet. He won't bother anyone. I just wanted you to know." Margaret looked at him. She thought briefly, unexpectedly, about how many people moved through her building every single day carrying entire lives she knew absolutely nothing about. "There's something I'd like you to see," Daniel continued. 4 minutes, maybe 5, before your meeting." She should have said no. She had 40 minutes and a vendor and 14 things on her list. 4 minutes, she said. He nodded. Turned toward the stairwell. "Stay quiet. Follow me. I want to show you something." She followed him up. Past the first floor, past the second. Her own building felt unfamiliar from behind him, like seeing a painting from the back, from the frame, from the wall it hung on. Different angles, different truth. She didn't know what she was walking toward. She was about to find out. The break room on the 3rd floor was quiet. One boy sat alone at the far corner table. No phone, no earbuds, no restless 12-year-old energy. He sat with a notebook open in front of him, a pencil moving slowly and deliberately across the page, his head slightly bowed. Drawing. Daniel stopped at the doorway and raised one hand gently. "Wait. Watch." Margaret stopped beside him. The only sounds were the soft scratch of pencil on paper and the distant hum of the building. She realized, with a small and startling shock, that she could not remember the last time she had stood completely still and simply watched something without evaluating it. Then Noah looked up, and when he saw his father in the doorway, something moved across that boy's face that Margaret was completely unprepared for. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't the performed happiness of a child putting on a show. It was relief, raw, unguarded, bone-deep relief. The relief of a child who had learned, far too young in the hardest way, that the people you love most can simply be there one morning and gone the next. Who had spent 3 years quietly, carefully rebuilding his sense of safety, and the entire foundation of that safety, the thing everything else rested on, was this one simple fact. His father walked back through the door. Every day, his father always walked back through the door. "Hey, bud," Daniel said softly. "Hey, Dad." 2 words, the weight of the whole world in them. Daniel walked over and looked down at the notebook, placed one hand briefly, gently on the back of his son's head. The touch of a man who has never once taken that moment for granted. Then he looked back toward the doorway. "Come see," he said quietly. Margaret walked forward slowly. The room felt different up close, warmer. She looked down at the notebook, and she stopped breathing. The drawing was detailed and careful and startlingly skilled for a 12-year-old hand. It showed a woman standing at a tall window, high above, a city. Her posture was straight, composed, controlled, Every line of her body said, "I am in charge of this." Below her, the city pulsed with life, people, light, movement, all the beautiful ordinary noise of human beings living close together, and she was above all of it, separated from all of it. Not sad exactly, something harder and more honest than sad. The particular aloneness of someone who has been so focused on getting to the top of something that they forgot to check whether anyone was still beside them when they arrived. Margaret stared at that drawing for a long time, longer than she had looked at anything in recent memory that didn't have a number attached to it. "Who is this?" she asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Noah looked up with those careful, serious eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly. When Dad talks about work sometimes, I imagine the person at the top, what it's like up there." He paused, studying the drawing. "She looks lonely, but I don't think she knows it yet." The room was absolutely silent. Margaret Calloway, who had not cried in a professional setting in 30 years, who had excised visible emotion from her working life, the way you excise anything that costs more than it returns, felt something move through her chest like a crack traveling through old stone. She looked at Daniel. He wasn't watching her with pity, not with the quiet satisfaction of a man making a point. He was looking at her the way he had looked at the broken elevator, steady, patient, certain that what was damaged could be repaired, if someone would just be still long enough to find the right part. "He's drawn this way since he could hold a pencil," Daniel said quietly. "Even after his mother passed, when neither of us had language for what we were carrying, he would sit down with that notebook and something true would come out. Sarah used to say he drew the things the rest of us were too busy or too frightened to admit were there. He said her name, Sarah, the way you say the name of someone whose absence is still a physical thing, not dramatically, just honestly, with the simple weight of a man who loved someone completely and lost her and has carried that loss every day since, without ever once putting it down." Margaret looked back at the drawing, at the woman in the window. "How long have you worked here?" she asked, barely above a whisper. 3 years, Daniel said. 3 years, she repeated. She straightened slowly, looked out the break room window at the gray October sky, and when she turned back, something in her face was different. The professional composure was still there. It doesn't vanish in a moment, 30 years of it, but behind it, visible now in a way it hadn't been before, was something real, something tired and honest and very, very human. "I didn't know," she said, and they both understood she was not talking about him. Daniel nodded once, quietly. "Most people don't," he said. "That's really the whole problem, isn't it?" Margaret ran her vendor meeting that afternoon exactly as she always had. Professionally, precisely, effectively. But something had shifted inside her chest that no amount of professional composure could press back into place. Like a window opened. In a room that had been sealed for years, you can't unfeel the fresh air. After the meeting, before she went back upstairs, she stopped by the break room. Noah was still there, still drawing. She sat down across from him, this 57-year-old woman who had spent 3 decades at the absolute top of everything she had ever attempted. And she said quietly, "Will you show me how you do that?" And Noah looked at her with those serious eyes. And then, slowly, he smiled. For the first time. And something about that smile, simple, unguarded, freely given, reached into Margaret Calloway's chest and touched something she had genuinely forgotten was still there. For the next 25 minutes, Margaret learned how to draw a tree, badly, imperfectly, with her tongue pressed slightly to her lip in concentration, the way children look when they are trying something new and don't yet know enough to be self-conscious about it. For the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, she did something with no strategy behind it. No outcome to optimize, no return on investment to calculate, no result to measure or present or defend. She just sat with a child and drew a tree, And somewhere in those 25 minutes, in the soft scratch of pencil on paper and the warm, ordinary light of a break room on a gray October afternoon, Margaret Calloway quietly began to remember who she had been before she became everything she had worked so hard to be. Now I want to speak to you, directly, just you and me. Because if you have lived past 50, if you have worked hard and loved people and buried some of them and kept getting up anyway, then you already know everything this story just said. You knew it before Daniel ever picked up that wrench. You knew it before Noah ever opened that notebook. You have known it your whole life, in the place inside you where the truest things live. The most important things in this life make no noise. They don't announce themselves. They don't sit in corner offices or appear on balance sheets or show up in any magazine that has ever celebrated success. They stand at kitchen stoves at 6:15 in the morning, making breakfast for someone who needs them. They fix what is broken before anyone notices the breaking. They come home every single evening because someone small and quiet and brave is counting the minutes until they do. Real wealth is presence. Real wealth is the note tucked in a lunchbox. Real wealth is staying on the couch at 10 o'clock at night when your child comes and sits beside you and says nothing, because they don't need words from you. They just need to know you are there and you are staying. You have known a Daniel. I know you have. Someone who carried everything quietly and never asked for recognition and gave you something, a moment, a word, a simple act of steady love that no amount of money has ever been able to replace. Someone whose name still rises in you sometimes. Unexpectedly in the quiet moments, think of that person right now. Don't rush past it. Just think of them. Before you go, 3 things. First, if this story moved something in you today, give it a like. It takes 1 second, and it tells me that these stories matter and that I should keep telling them. Second, drop 1 word in the comments below. Just 1 word. What does real wealth mean to you? Not money, not status, the real kind. The kind Daniel had. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know your word. Third, if this is your first time here, welcome. This is what we do. We tell real, human, unforgettable stories, built for people who have lived enough life to know the difference between what is loud and what is true. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss one. The next story is already waiting, and I have a feeling you are going to want to be here for it.